Hello, how are you doing today? I hope you are staying cool enough. I know here it is very hot, and I think most of the country is having a heat wave. Well, today Grandma wants to read you a story from one of her books that she had as a kid called one of the fairy tales. And this is titled The Princess Who Lived on a Glass Hill. Once upon a time, there was a man who had a fine meadow. It lay high on a hillside where it got the first spring sun and was plentifully watered from mountain streams. The man and his two oldest sons tended it well, but Boots, the youngest son, was kept so busy with cleaning and poking the ashes and cinders that he never became very handy with cutting or raking long grass, nor did he often have a chance to breathe the cool air of the upland meadow. So this is a meadow where they would make hay for the winter. Now, one St. John's Eve. Do you know when St. John's Eve is? I had to look it up. St. John's Eve it starts at sunset on June 23rd, and it is in celebration of the birth of John the Baptist. So that's what St. John's Eve is about. It's a Catholic holiday, apparently. So one St. John's Eve, just as the hay was getting ripe, it was eaten down to the last juicy stalk and blade. The field was left bare as the sanded shore. The second year, the same thing happened, and the man said to his eldest son, "Next St. John's Eve, go and stay in the barn and see what creature it is that comes destroying our fields." So when the season rolled round, the eldest son went. All was quiet until midnight. Then there was such a rumbling that the walls began to shake, and the eldest son ran away to save his life and did not stop until he reached the house. Again in the morning, the whole hay crop was gone. And here's a picture of the eldest son running away when all the noise and shaking happened at midnight. The next year, the second son was set to watch. There was little difference except that at midnight, the second son ran home faster than his brother had. And in the morning, even the vines on the low stone walls were stripped of their green leaves. The third year, Boots, the youngest son, said, "Let me try. You who sit in ashes all day, you could surely do more than the two of us together," his brothers said mockingly. "I'd like to go," said Boots. "You'll never come back alive, that's all," they said. "The morning will tell," said Boots, and shaking the soot from his ragged clothes, he went out to the barn. At midnight there came such a noise as he had never heard, not even when the thunderbolts played their loudest among the hills. You know what he's talking about? Thunderstorms. In some areas there are very loud thunderstorms. "If that's all, I might as well bide here," said Boots. The noise came nearer and nearer. "I'd much better stay and see what it is." At last, when silence fell, Boots went out into the meadow. There, in the late twilight, he saw a fine black horse grazing. On the horse's back was a saddle bound with brass. Across it lay a fine coat of mail. Even the bridle was of brass. "So it's you that's been eating all the hay in our meadow," said Boots. "Take a good bite, for you'll get no more of this grass." With that, Boots took the steel out of his tinder box and threw it over the horse. At once the horse became so tame that Boots could lead it anywhere. I don't know how a piece of tinder, of steel from his tinder box, could make the horse tame, but this is a fairy tale, so that's what happened. He hid the great animal in a secret place that he knew of. The next morning, when his brothers saw him, they called, "And how was it in the barn?" "Warm for this time of year," said Boots. "I slept like a mouse in its hole." "Then we're sure to find the field bare as stone." But when they went to look, the grass was rippling in the wind. There's Boots coming home from the barn, and his brothers are so surprised to see him. The next year, Boots went again to the barn. With midnight came the noise, thrice as loud as before. When it was over, and his bones had stopped rattling, Boots went out into the field. By the light of the stars, he could see an even larger horse than the first. And as Boots came nearer, its bright chestnut flanks shone in the glow of his lantern. Chestnut is kind of a brown color of a horse. "So it's you that's been eating all the hay in our meadow," said Boots. "Take a good bite, for you'll get no more of this grass." He threw the steel from his tinderbox over the horse's back. As he led the horse away, he saw that its bridle, the saddle, and the coat of mail upon it were inlaid with silver. In the morning, his brothers found Boots asleep on the hearth. They shook him roughly to waken him. "Luck was with you last St. John's Eve," they said, "but it's certain there'll not be so much as a straw left in the meadow today." What was their surprise to see that the hay was thicker than it had been at sundown. And there are the brothers, shaking Boots awake as he's lying asleep on the hearth. The third St. John's Eve, Boots went to the barn as before. At midnight, the sounds were terrifying. The roof jumped up and down and seemed about to crash in upon him. The whole earth trembled, and he felt as if all the bells in the countryside were tolling inside his head. "As for that," said Boots, sticking his fingers in his ears, "a bit of clanging and banging never hurt anybody." When the roof stopped chittering and shattering on the walls, Boots went out into the field. There he found the biggest horse he had ever seen. It was pure white and shone like a snow mountain in the moonlight. Bridle, saddle, and coat of mail were cunningly wrought with gold. "So it's you that's been eating all the hay in our meadow," said Boots. "Take a good bite, for you'll get no more of this grass." He threw his steel over the horse and was at once able to lead the horse away. As he had done with the other two horses, Boots saw that the white horse was well fed and watered. He groomed all three horses until their coats were as smooth as mirrors, and he combed their long manes and tails. When the haying was done in the meadow that year, the two oldest sons made ready to set out for the king's castle. For in that land the princess was so beautiful that the king had put her on a high glass hill. In her lap were 3 golden apples. The king had sent forth word that whoever could ride up the glass hill and get the 3 apples should have the princess and half the kingdom. The 2 brothers were greedy for the prize. Boots asked if he might go with them. "You, ragged, with ashes in your hair, go to the king's castle?" they scoffed. "Why, you would make us the laughing stock of the land." Here's the picture with the princess on top of the glass hill. Isn't she beautiful? With the 3 golden apples in her lap. Willingly enough, Boots set out alone. He got to the castle on the day the contest was to take place. In the early morning, the glass hill was pale and looked like flowing water. One gallant knight after another tried to mount its steep sides, but the farther up they got, the more quickly they slipped back. The first shadows were turning the glass hill to deep violet and blue purple, and the king was about to proclaim an end to the trials for the day, when out of the crowd came a rider on a black horse. His suit of mail, his bridle and saddle were ornamented with brass. As easily as if he were trotting down instead of up, he rode a third of the way on the glass hill. Then suddenly he turned his horse and slowly cantered back. When the princess saw him, she knew she had never looked upon so brave a knight. She threw him one of her golden apples, and it rolled into his shoe. When the two brothers got home that night, Boots was cleaning the kettles. They could talk of nothing but the beauty of the princess. Ah, they sighed. Her eyes are as blue as our pond in June, said Boots. And her cheeks are like the May buds on our thorn apple tree, said Boots. Her hair's as gold as the first pale daffodil cups in the sunny corner of our stone wall, said Boots. And what a sight was the strange horseman on top of a black steed. He rode part of the way to the top of the glass hill, and so gained one of the golden apples. I would like to have seen that, said Boots. The king's guards would never have let you through the gates. You and your cinders, said his brothers, taunting him. There's the picture of Boots cleaning the pot and his brothers talking to him. The second day, even more men came riding, and more slid down the glass hill, some frontward, some backward, and some thrown high over their horses' heads. Just as the last beams of the sun changed the glass hill into a mountain of transparent gold, a strange knight appeared. He sat upon a horse, chestnut in color, and his mail, bridle, and saddle were shining with hammered silver. The princess thought him even more handsome than the knight on the black steed. She tossed the second golden apple toward him, and it rolled into his shoe. On the second night, while Boots polished the copper pots, his brothers told how another knight had succeeded in climbing 2/3 of the way up the glass hill, and so had been given the second golden apple. And he was even grander than the first, his horse a bright chestnut brown, and his armor inlaid with pure silver. Ah, said Boots, how I wish I could have been there just to watch. The villagers would have shoved you off the road for a beggar, you and your ashes, said his brothers, and they ordered Boots to bring them their supper and be quick about it. Here is the picture of the second knight about to climb the glass hill. The third day of the contest was even more of a rout. Bold riders fell on their backs and faces, and horses came down farther on their haunches than ever they went up on their hooves. At sunset, the glass hill was so bright, it fairly blinded those who gazed at it, for it gave back all the blazing colors of the skies. At the foot of the hill was seen a knight on a white horse, his armor burning with red gold that gathered up the light in most dazzling rays. His great horse charged to the top, almost in a single bound. Just as the knight wheeled to descend, the princess reached to give him the last of her 3 apples. It fell and bounced against his shoe. There is the princess, giving her apple to the third knight that charged to the top of the hill. That night, Boots was scraping the soot off the chimney when his brothers came into the kitchen, their jaws hanging open with astonishment at what they had seen. This day, a knight on a white horse went to the top of the hill in one jump. The princess wasted no time in tossing him the third golden apple. That we can tell you. His suit of mail and his saddle were covered with honest gold. Why, his very bridle would be a fortune for a man. As they thought of the riches they had lost, the eyes of the two brothers half closed until they looked like slits in a penny bank waiting for coppers. Those are pennies, copper pennies. There is Boots, cleaning the chimney, with his brothers telling him the story of what they've seen that day. The following morning, the king called for the three champions who had won the golden apples to come to the castle, but no one came. The next day, he ordered every rider in his kingdom to pass before him. Still, there were none who had the apples. The princess wept, for she feared she had lost her suitors and would never see them again. At last the king said, "Is there not another man in this whole land? For surely we did not dream of these happenings." "There's Boots," said his brothers, "but he's not likely to have any golden apples, for we know he hasn't stirred from the hearth these 3 days." "Still," said the king, "let him be called." When Boots, dusty and flecked with soot, appeared before the king, the castle guards asked, "Have you the golden apples?" And there are all the horses passing before the king. What do you think? Have you the golden apples, they were asking? "Yes," said Boots, and he took them out of his old leather wallet. The folk all gasped, but not so much as when he pulled off his torn rags and stood before them, the knight in the gilded armor. The princess ran from her throne to greet him. The wedding feast took place at once. As for the two brothers, they were glad to hire themselves out, one to cut and one to rake in the king's hayfields. And as for Boots and the princess, they were one day made king and queen, and they lived happily ever after together. And there are the two brothers working in their little brother's hayfields because their little brother has become the king. So that's just a fun fairy tale story that I thought you might enjoy. All right. I hope you are having a good day. And Grandma will record some more again later. Remember, I love you lots. Talk to you later.